I'm here to warn people. You keep telling me to shut up. This isn't a game.
From the front lines of the information war, it's Alex Jones.
Now, we've got some callers on the line. We've been talking about the revelation from the Poughkeepsie mayor who said that he and 50 other mayors have left Bloomberg's group because they realize that the agenda is a full-out confiscation. It's not about taking guns away from felons. It's about confiscating the guns of law-abiding citizens who have a natural right that has been respected in the Constitution in the Second Amendment. I want to take your calls and get your feedback on it. AMG in Alabama, what do you think about this issue?
Good evening.
Hey.
Sorry about this. I was actually calling about the sniper attack that was released a few days ago.
Okay, yes. On the power structure, on the transformers in Silicon Valley. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I was calling to say that I respectfully disagree with the analysis that it's a false flag.
Okay. And why?
Because they're missing a patsy. You don't plant a false flag that makes the government look bad. You plant a false flag that's going to make the government look good in any capacity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Without a patsy, it just the only message it's going to say is, hey, the NSA, the police state cannot even protect its own infrastructure, much less you.
Well, that's why we talked about it. You know, not all false flags are directed at the public. Sometimes false flags are directed at law enforcement. Sometimes they're directed at members of Congress. Sometimes they're just trying to get law enforcement hyped up to think that there's a much larger threat than there really is, so they'll be more abusive, so that maybe they won't really care about following the law or the constitutional procedures or due process, but they'll be eager to do whatever the government bids them to do. At the time this was happening, there was a debate in Congress back in April about CISPA. And, of course, that's cybersecurity, but it was all about infrastructure. And infrastructure was a big part of it. So what we're saying is that could have been something that was done to get people online, on board with CISPA at the time that was happening, people in Congress. But what looks suspicious to us about this is that it was put out as a vandalism charge, even though it was very, very carefully planned. They took out these transformers without blowing them up. They had obviously spotted this area prior to that. They even went underground and cut phone lines. So it was very careful how they were very carefully planned, very carefully executed. But then it was also pulled back. And now the concern is, and it may be just that this one guy was looking at it and thinking that, well, nothing has happened. Nobody's really talking about it. But the fellow who was the former chairman of the FERC has now come public with this and said, this is not an act of vandalism. Clearly, it was not simply an act of vandalism. So the question is, was it real terrorists, or was it an inside false flag? Or are they preparing us for some kind of a false flag in the future? Do you disagree?
Not entirely. I go with the real terrorism because it's too carefully planned to neglect the patsy if there's a false flag. Now, if it turns out that the patsy was made to disappear under NDAA and that comes out later, then yes, it's probably a false flag and I'll eat my hat then. But
yeah, typically with a false flag, they typically come out right away. They've got a suspect. Right away, they've got a lone gunman. Right away, they try to panic the public about this. And so that in and of itself was interesting, but we do understand that not all false flags are necessarily directed at the public at that time. And so that's our concern about it. Thank you so much. Let's talk to Spence in Missouri. Spence, what's your take on gun control?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've been driving, so I'm on my cell phone. It's, thank goodness for y'all's show. About 2 years ago, I got woken up, and I've tried several times. I've sent you some letters and sent you some emails to Alex trying to reach him, because this problem that we have is almost like a one-legged duck swimming in a circle. You know, it's we all know about this problem. Everybody that listens to the show is not from the other side. You know, let's say that we're 20%, 25% of us out here that are listening to the show. We know these problems. We go to work day by day, understanding, feeling this in our heart, and we just don't know what to do about it. And the letters I've written to Alex was pertaining to doing, the proper marketing and trying to do what the globalists have been successful doing, and that is copying, mimicking what they've done by doing the type of marketing that they've done. We could do it very easily with just the people that are listening right now, and that is, in your area, if you had, I know that there's info warriors that are out there. I know there's people that believe like we all believe, but if you took Fox News for an example, they've got different satellite offices in different states, and inside those states, they've got their own in every county, basically. So what I'm saying is, we need to market this thing to get to the people, because all of the people in this country, you can't tell me that they don't still have the fundamentals deep down inside and want freedom and justice and liberty for all. We've all got to band together, and we have to learn how to do that banding. And if it's printing out flyers and going to the post office or going to the local place where the most people end up going every day to hand these flyers out to get this country really aware of what's going on, then the globalists will never survive this. There's no
Well, that's
way
absolutely
that they
true.
can.
You need to talk to your friends and neighbors. And we're trying to do everything we can in every venue that we go. We got the Infowars.com website. We have Prison Planet TV, where we have the nightly news. We're getting ready to roll that out to local television stations and major markets. We've got magazines. We're trying to do everything we can. We're producing documentaries. There are YouTube videos. If you get a subscription, you can pass that out to 10 other people, Prison Planet TV. So you can forward the news to 10 other people, and the subscription's not that expensive. So there's a lot that you can do to just pass our information around. And, of course, other people are putting this stuff out as well. The key thing is that it's an information war. It's been an information war quite some time, and the other side is using it as propaganda, just like the clip that we played earlier from Eric Holder. Eric Holder, he admitted that it's propaganda. They need to brainwash people. We're not trying to brainwash people. We're trying to present the truth to them. And we get it out as soon as we see it. We try to be as objective as possible. And I can tell you, I've been working here for over a year and a half, and Alex Jones is totally committed to this stuff. He's putting everything he can into trying to get this out in as many different venues as possible. So I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Hello, this is Hank Hill, and I'm telling you what, you need to listen to Alex Jones.
Yeah. Infowars.com.
Judge, what is the secret of the universe?
Infowars.com.
Man who fled communism blasts Oregon lawmakers for their gun control attempt. Carl, what did you want to say about that?
Well, I didn't know if you had a chance to listen to it, but this video should in some way become the poster man of the Second Amendment, because it's awesome. And then my question, I'll throw this at you too, is isn't there some kind of legality with government, whether federal or state, funding their garbage of trying to sell to the public and using our tax dollars to do that? There's got to be a way that's got to be illegal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's they do propaganda all the time. They've got ad agencies that do propaganda. They've got this whole thing called the government school system that is basically selling their agenda constantly. But, yeah, I haven't seen that video yet, but I have seen one from a Chinese fellow who was speaking at a gun control rally in Massachusetts about a year ago. Very, very compelling testimony, because he was at Tiananmen Square when that happened. And he said, you know what, if we had the weapons, Tiananmen Square wouldn't have come down the same way as it did. That's something very important to remember. Now, this article that Carl was just talking about, Carl from Washington, Mikhail Thalen put up on InfoWars on Friday. He's got a couple of quotes from the video. He says, this is the fellow who escaped communism in 1962. He escaped from Cuba. His name is Manuel Martinez. And he said, don't sell me this gun control. A very powerful man tried to sell me this 50 some odd years ago, and I didn't buy it. This is Marxism, plain and clear. He said they put this dog and pony show on saying, hey, we're going to protect you. No, what they did was to enslave a country. They destroyed a country the same way that this country is going to be destroyed if we continue in this fashion. This is what you are selling here. You know, when we were at the Alamo, we asked Alex and Anthony Gucciardi, I was filming, they asked if they would confiscate the guns if given the order to do so. And they hedged and hedged and hedged and finally said, well, it's a hypothetical scenario. Anthony pointed out, your oath to the Constitution is not a hypothetical. They train on hypothetical scenarios all the time, but they wouldn't give a straight answer. And that was a very clear, yes, I would confiscate, just like the police chief in New Orleans did. And, you know, at the Alamo, so many people who are both English or Spanish, Hispanic, will try to portray that as a group of Anglos taking from Mexico the territory of Texas. But we need to understand, just as Alex pointed out to Piers Morgan, Santa Anna tried to take the guns. Santa Anna came to power and revoked the Constitution in Mexico and started confiscating guns. And it wasn't just Texas. You know, there were Anglos as well as Hispanics that were fighting at the Alamo and fighting Santa Anna. But it wasn't just Texas. You know, there were 11 provinces that rebelled against Santa Anna. And there were 3 provinces that actually formed their own government. That was Tejas, the Rio Grande, and the Yucatan. Now, of all those 3, only Texas survived. Only Texas was able to free themselves from Santa Anna, who was a military dictator. He came to power with a military coup. He threw the Constitution out. He started confiscating weapons, just like Fidel Castro. And it isn't a Spanish thing. It isn't a German thing. It's a government thing. It's democide. It's what they do when they confiscate the weapons. They want to be the only ones to have weapons. That empowers them. Whenever weapons are concentrated in the hands of a few people, you always have despotism. You always have democide. And, you know, it's not just the firearms. We've got something coming down the lane that is far more dangerous, something that is going to affect the police themselves if they continue to go along with this tyrannical agenda, and that is the government owning weapons that are remotely controlled, robots, drones, that sort of thing. At that point, they're no longer going to need the police to enforce their laws. Now at that point, you're going to have so much power concentrated in the hands of so few people. It is very difficult at that point to try to pull that back. We're going to need all the firearms we can get if we can't stop the military-industrial complex from the militarization that they're doing now and then turning that over so that just a few people in some underground bunker in the middle of the continental United States can remote control their terrorism on everybody. This will involve everyone, not just the citizens. It will involve the police because they will at that point no longer need the police. Let's go to the Heretic in Washington. Heretic, you got something to say?
Hello, David.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing real good. You guys were stealing my material about 15 years ago. I came up with the expression, the feral grabbit.
Okay, good.
I like that one even better.
Yeah, that's good.
Where I want to go, it's maybe a little presumptuous, but I want to take it to a degree that Alex was going to bring up about 15, 16 months ago, and that was Representative Larry McDonald on Crossfire back in the 1980s before he was excommunicated on Flight 007. Right. All of the agenda of the New World Order was brought to the fore in that interview. So if you guys can definitely get that up and running and play it about once a month.
Oh, he was very, very, very articulate man, wasn't he? Such a shame to lose him. He really knew what was going on, and he was able to hold his own in a debate with anyone. He was truly an amazing person, a real patriot.
Right. That one particular interview on Crossfire with Louis Rukeyser and Pat Buchanan, it literally went to the crux of the UN world order, including the confiscation worldwide of firearms.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, you know, the UN Arms Trade Treaty is something that we have talked about here repeatedly. It is something that even though it's been pushed back time and time again, it is still in play. They never give up on any of these tactics. And we need to understand that the core thing about the UN Arms Trade Treaty is that they're They're going to say that they're going to stop the movement of arms across borders in any direction. Now, of course, to do that, they need universal registration, not only of guns, but of ammunition. That's what they want to do. I was at the UN when they were debating it last, it was in July, not last July, it was July 2012. And Fast and Furious was set up to create the case that they needed the UN Arms Trade Treaty. But of course, that blew up in their face, and it really blew up right about the time that they had scheduled to bring it to a vote. So they said, wait, we're not going to do it now. We don't want to interfere with the American elections that were coming up in a couple of months. So they said, we'll have it right after the elections. And sure enough, the day of the election, as they saw that they were going to have more Democrats in the Senate, that Obama was going to be reelected, they said, we're going to revisit this again in the spring. We have to be very careful about that. That is the stated purpose of the UN Arms Trade Treaty. They want to register everyone's firearms, everyone's ammunition. That is another. They take multiple approaches to this. This is a multi-pronged attack. They don't just come after us with Mayor Bloomberg and his guys. They don't just come after us with gun laws at the local level. They come after us with laws at the local level, at the state level, at the national level.
Introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gate, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. Get your Pro Pure with the new Pro One filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139.
Now, it's interesting to note that the Magnificent Seven story is a story that was directly taken from a Japanese film, The Seven Samurai by Akira Kurosawa. They even credited him with it in the opening credits of the movie. And, you know, you can, maybe your wife doesn't like to watch Westerns, you know, maybe you could talk her into it, tell her that Yul Brynner is in it, same guy that was in The King and I, or you can talk your kids into watching a Western that's about 50, 60 years old by telling them that they can look for and identify some themes that are repeated in A Bug's Life. That's right. It's about tyranny. And it's about what happens when weapons are held in the hands of a few people. If you remember the story of the Magnificent Seven, this is a Mexican village that was being terrorized by bandits. The federales, the local police would do or could do nothing about it. So what they do is they go and they hire some mercenaries. The same story that was in The Seven Samurai. But they didn't just sit on the sidelines. They brought these guys down. They didn't know how to use guns. They got training. They got equipment. And they fought alongside these professionals to take back their country. Ultimately, your defense is up to you. You cannot delegate it to someone else. You need to get the tools to defend yourself. And we see people doing that throughout this country on a very, very large scale. We see gun sales are soaring in this country because people understand that we have a fragile infrastructure. We are sitting on the edge economically of another bubble that could burst at any time. Any number of things could happen. Any kind of scenario could happen. We could have the government coming along and setting up martial law based on false flags. So people are taking it upon themselves to train themselves, just like the villagers in the Magnificent Seven. One of the most powerful films, I think, to get people to understand what this is really about. You know, the Second Amendment is not just about protecting yourself against bandits, but against governments, against gangs that are out of control. That's what it's about. And you can see that in this movie. It's a wonderful movie. When you watch a film, it gets you at a visceral level. And it makes that argument because you get involved in people's lives. You can tell your wife there's a romance story in there. There's even some story there but watch it with your family. It's a great thing to watch with a purpose and talk about it. Talk about it with your friends. That's what this is all about. And we got some callers on the line. Let's go to Spence in Missouri. Spence? Are you still there? Spence. Maybe Spence isn't there. Let's go to Scott in Vermont. Scott?
Hello, David.
Hey, how you doing, Scott?
Good. About heroin and guns, it seems like every other day there's a heroin bust here in Vermont. There's not a whole lot of people in Vermont, but a lot of heroin apparently. And our governor, a very liberal governor, pro-abortion, pro-queer marriage, he was on one of those Sunday morning news shows lamenting about the problem and basically asking for more federal help, I guess. But, of course, he didn't bring up the source of most of the heroin.
Yes.
There's a website I found, ciadrugs.com. And we should, just like we should culture jam the media like that courageous guy did, grabbing a microphone and saying, investigate 9/11 right after the Super Bowl. We could, say, dare to keep the CIA off drugs, and websites like ciadrugs.com on billboards or message boards or standing by the highway with a sign.
Well, as Alex pointed out in his earlier report, they were only supplying out of Afghanistan 7% of the world's heroin, and now that has shot up to like 90%, I believe, is the number, since we got there. And we're helping to guard the fields. We're helping to transport the material. We've seen this happening over and over again. Gary Webb broke this wide open in a series of investigative reports about how the U.S. government was involved in the crack cocaine trade with Freeway Ricky Ross, and how they were involved with Nicaraguan Contras, and for his trouble, he was suicided. So this is something that has been around for quite some time. We had a report a couple of weeks ago about it's actually the guy who was a lawyer for the CIA. He's now getting around to writing his memoirs, telling us how proud he is of making the legal brief for waterboarding people, saying that that wasn't torture. He's the guy that's responsible for that. So the name of the book is Company Man, and if there ever was a company man, he's the company man, and of course the CIA, that's a nickname for them, the company. But in that, there was an interesting admission where he was talking about how they worked with people in Hollywood, using them for intelligence, using them as spies in other countries. And he said, one guy said he would do it for $50,000 worth of cocaine, and this lawyer who wrote the book claim that tried to pretend that this was a very unusual request, that why would they ask us for cocaine? That's ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Everybody knows what the CIA is doing. We've exposed that over and over again. Thanks for calling, Scott. Let's go to Phil in Florida. Phil?
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on. Hey, you had a guy call earlier that said that the power plant couldn't have been a false flag, but it could be a false flag to try to take away the guns or to make it so that you can't get a high-powered scope or something like that, because they're saying they're snipers. So,
Exactly. We never know. It's very suspicious because of the way that it happened. It was clearly a professionally done event, and if it were terrorists, either they did so many things correctly, and yet they didn't get the desired effect of shutting down the power grid, or they were trying to do it as a false flag. And as I pointed out to him, as we've pointed out on Friday, false flag could be directed at legislators. It could be directed at law enforcement. It's not necessarily directed at the public. And we need to be careful, because now that they are making it public, we might see this used, as you mentioned, for pushing for gun control.
Right. And, it reminded me a lot of, the fact that they can't track them kind of reminded me of the WMD thing, where even though we had Iraq under surveillance, somehow they managed to sneak the WMD out of the country, and that gave us the right to go to war there and have our president, kill possibly 1 million collateral damage, whatever, and then to make fun of it at the national press for.
Yes.
To go running around looking underneath tables. I mean, just the most decadent thing that anybody could do when all those lives are taken.
And I want people to understand, too, that it was Barack Obama who gave George Bush essentially a pardon, said we're not going to prosecute them for lying, for taking us to war under a lie. We're not going to prosecute them for waterboarding and people, even though we executed Japanese military who did that to American soldiers in World War II. We executed them for that. And yet our government did it. It was approved at the highest levels of our government, and nobody was tried for that. And Barack Obama not only let him get away with it, but he also gave him a pardon for it. So, people who want to play this left-right, Republican-Democrat game, they need to wake up and understand that it's coming from both of these sides. Thank you.
Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.